Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and good afternoon. Warm greetings to everyone. I hope you all are safe and in good health as you join us for yet another interesting discussion. My name is Kanchi Batra, and on behalf of our publisher, Ms. Linda Brady-Hawk, I welcome you all the distinguished speakers and participants to this webinar. The Diplomatist is delighted to host this trade webinar in partnership with UK-India Business Council, powered by India Economic Trade Organization. My sincere gratitude to Mr. Kevin McCall, Managing Director, UK IBC, and Dr. Asif Iqbal, President, IETO, for coming on board and supporting this initiative. This discussion will try to explore Roadmap 2030, importance of the FTA, and delve into the progress made so far, as well as the challenges, obstacles, and opportunities for British and Indian industry. Most importantly, why tariff negotiations are important to consider while negotiating the trade deal. As we know, India and UK have had a long special relationship, and as part of the enhanced trade partnership, both the countries have agreed to negotiate a free trade agreement between them. They have indicated that they aim to start negotiations by the end of the year. Our expert panel will give business and industry views about the areas of potential future FTA where the governments of both these countries will prioritize trade. For the past 25 years, the Diplomatist has been publishing sectoral and country reports based on business market intelligence. The creation has a reputation for editorial excellence, design talent, cutting-edge reporting and integrity, and is known for independent and balanced writing. Without taking much time, I am now going to release our special report. Okay. This report analyzes trade in some detail, pinpointing a variety of focus industries. It also emphasizes the importance of trade and services for both countries. It highlights the opportunities that exist for both British and Indian businesses alike. Our experienced writers have tried to provide fresh insights that will serve as a useful guide for businesses and policymakers. The report also echoes the importance of people-to-people connection, the living bridge between the two countries, as characterized by a dynamic and engaged 1.5 million strong Indian diaspora. I would like to express my appreciation to all our amazing authors and contributors for their informative inputs. All of them are accomplished writers with several published works to their credit. Thank you. I would also like to thank all those who have submitted questions and concerns during registration. We have consolidated them and passed it on to the chair of today's discussion. The chair will be addressing as many as he can during the question and answer session. Before we begin, I would like to inform all our participants that if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A box. We will send you all the relevant links after the event. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Sujit Nair, Chairman, Europe India Center for Business and Industry, who will get us started with an overview of this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Nair, for joining us today. I wish you all every success in your deliberations. You may kindly start the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kanchi Batra. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, distinguished guests, members of parliament, panel speakers, and delegates. As Ms. Batra mentioned, my name is Sujit Nair. I'm the chairman of Europe India Center for Business and Industry. We are an independent think tank and association with our various partner organizations. We have been playing a role in promoting closer trade and relations in the UK-India, EU-India corridor over the past 10 years. I would like to thank Diplomatist magazine for giving me the opportunity to chair this discussion on India-UK Vision 2020 and enhanced trade partnership. I would set the stage for the discussion and then we'll have the panelists taking over from there. India and UK in the month of May this year adopted an ambitious roadmap 2030 during the virtual bilateral summit between India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his British counterpart Boris Johnson that intends to elevate the bilateral ties between India and UK to a comprehensive strategic partnership. The specialty of this partnership is that when two parties enter into this kind sort of an agreement or partnership, they both must be clear on the goals. The 2020 roadmap for India-UK relations outlines plans for the relationship for the next 10 years. UK is the first European country to be granted that status by India. The countries agreed to continue removing trade barriers on the path to a free trade agreement and an ambitious target of more than doubling India-UK trade by 2030. The Roadmap 2030 will provide a framework for UK-India relation across 7 sectors. These sectors happens to be health, climate, trade, education, science and technology, and defense. There will be an annual strategic review meeting at the foreign minister level to monitor the implementation of the roadmap. If required, update it and report back to the progress to the respective prime ministers of both nations. This shows the seriousness of two nations to ensure that the plans for the roadmap are actually implemented on the ground. I will put forth few insights from the roadmap so as to set the stage for this discussion. I will then leave it to the panelists, our expert panelists out here, to discuss about the feasibility of these of achieving these ambitions and also their inputs regarding the same. The first one of the insight is how the two nations have launched the enhanced trade partnership with aims to speed up negotiations for a free trade agreement. The roadmap announces that India and UK are launching an enhanced trade partnership, which includes ambition to double the value of UK-India trade by 2030 and speed up the first phase of pre-negotiation for a future free trade agreement. This is a positive step in UK-India relation. The roadmap includes the agreement of investment deals valued at almost £1 billion, including commercial deals of £533 million investment from India into the UK, which, if they eventualize, could generate more than 6,000 jobs. The second key insight is how India and UK will aim to work closely together on issues of climate change and reversing biodiversity loss. In the roadmap, India and UK commit to working together and co-leading the global climate action, outlining plans to launch the Global Green Grids initiative at COP26. COP26 is a UN climate change conference of parties, which is expected to be held in Glasgow on 31st October and to 12th November 2021. This will help achieve India's vision of one sun, one world, one grid, aiming to implement a transnational electricity grid to support solar power world. The two nations will also work together and shape best practice in development of offshore wind energy and electricity. On tackling cyberspace crime and terrorist threats, with aim to developing a free, open, and secure Indo-Pacific region to maximize democratic participation and economic opportunities and counter the threat posed by a rising China. India and UK will focus on research, innovation, and technology. Given these are the areas of expertise for both nations to develop new capabilities within defense and security spheres. The next insight, which has always been a sort of a contention between India and UK, is the mobility. That is about facilitating mobility between the two nations. And some progress seems to have happened during the last interaction. Given India's and UK's shared history, values, and culture, the roadmap outlines the importance of a strong people-to-people relationship between India and the UK. The roadmap outlines a new migration mobility partnership for students and professionals, which will be implemented by April 2022. The partnership aims to encourage exchange and migration to facilitate enhanced cooperation in the next 10 years. The new migration mobility partnership includes a young professional scheme, which will support the movement of up to 3,000 young and talented British and Indian graduates to live and work in the other country for up to 2 years. In return, what India has agreed is to accelerate the process of deporting citizens who are living illegally within the UK. The next insight, which is more from a health perspective, is about the India and UK will guarantee equitable global vaccine supply by April 2022. This aims to show an ambition by UK and India to not only tackle more urgent issues relating to COVID-19, but also develop solutions for non-communicable diseases and aging-related challenges. Alongside this, the two nations have committed to guaranteeing equitable global vaccine supply by April 2022 through an India-UK partnership on vaccines and diagnostics, as well as expanding the current UK-India vaccines hub. So these are a few insights which are sort of put forth just to get a broader understanding of what we can sort of expect in the discussion today. I would call upon the panelists now to share their insights on Roadmap 2030. I'm glad to have friends, collaborators, and acquaintances who have been active in the UK-India corridor over the past few years as part of this panel discussion. First, I would like to call upon Mr. Kevin McCall, Managing Director of UK-India Business Council, to speak on the topic of UK and India, removing barriers and doubling trade. Been acquainted with Kevin since 2009 during the initial years of UKIBC, and I'm proud of his contributions in building a stronger UK-India relationship over the past few years. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Sujit. Yes, I think we and the UK-India relationship have come a long way since 2009. And look, good morning to everyone in the UK. Good afternoon to all our friends in India. It's a real pleasure to be representing the UK-India Business Council at this important event today. And a huge thank you to Kanchi and her colleagues, the diplomatists, for inviting me to take part, and for the UKIBC to partner in this initiative. Now, of course, we're here today to discuss the UK-India Enhanced Trade Partnership. Now, I think it really matters when you've got the fifth and the sixth largest economies in the world, India and the UK, coming together. And perhaps arrogantly, I would argue that it matters not just for those two countries, but for the wider world as well. And in the next 8 or 9 minutes, I'll set out that the UK-India relationship is in a good place and getting better. I'll explain that barriers to trade and investment do exist, but I'll express confidence that these barriers are being removed and that governments will that target of doubling trade by 50 billion by 2030. So what is this good place that I think we're currently in? In the year before the pandemic, bilateral trade grew by about 10% to £24 billion. So trade was growing before the pandemic, and businesses are already well established in both countries. That bilateral investment relationship is really something special. UK direct investment into India is responsible for more than 400,000 direct jobs in India, and many more, hundreds of thousands indirectly. And at the same time, something like 850 Indian companies have created over 110,000 jobs in the UK. So, okay, so far so good. But what I think is maybe more encouraging is that businesses from both countries are enthusiastic and optimistic about the opportunities to do more. And the governments are stepping up to help make this more happen. And this stronger government role became clear, as Sujit mentioned, when the Prime Ministers Johnson and Modi set out on the 4th of May, the transformational comprehensive strategic partnership with that 10-year roadmap, which included the Enhanced Trade Partnership, the ambition to double trade by 2030, and the intention to open FTA talks before the end of this year. Now, within this 2030 roadmap, there are those themes that Sujit mentioned: healthcare, climate change, defence and security, trade and investment, and those people-to-people links, those people-to-people links that underpin and bring so much energy, innovation and dynamism to the UK-India relationship. Now, all 5 of those themes, I think, are important to businesses, and businesses are important in all 5 of those themes. But today, I just want to focus on the trade and investment one. And, I think the roadmap generally, and trade element of it specifically, is built in part on existing UK-India strengths that exist in science, in creativity and in innovation. And I think these generate opportunities in a range of sectors, for example, life sciences and healthcare, including digital health solutions. I think all things related to climate, COP26 is coming up, as Sujit mentioned, but there are business opportunities across renewable energy, electric vehicles, sustainable finance, waste energy, sustainable infrastructure. And there are also, increasing opportunities in defence, homeland security, cybersecurity. And I think we're about to see in the autumn, a major sort of UK defence sector visit to India when the Carrier Strike Group, which is on its a tour, if you like, of Asia Pacific, will be visiting India. So there are lots of defence collaboration discussions going on at that time. There are, though, of course, opportunities across probably every other sector, and the Enhanced Trade Partnership will only see those opportunities grow. Now, on the ETP, I think there are three things that I particularly like about it and I would like to share with you. The first is that it retains a focus on ease of doing business improvements, and it seeks to address market access and regulatory issues on an immediate and ongoing basis. So it's not just an FTA that will happen in the future. There are issues being resolved on a win-by-win, case-by-case basis. The second major positive of the ETP and the FTA is that it aims to cover goods and services, including those technology, digital, financial and IP-rich services where the UK and India are already globally competitive, but where there is so much scope to do so much more bilaterally. The third aspect of the ETP that I like is the impressive timetable we've touched on. Negotiations are very much on track to begin before the end of 2021. So from an announcement at the beginning of May to 6-7 months later, negotiations beginning, I think that's fantastic to see that aggressive, ambitious but achievable timetable. Now, it's not all going to be plain sailing. There may be stumbling blocks and things to address along the way. And in that context, I just wanted to mention the Self-Reliant India campaign. It was around May last year that Mr. Modi, in a speech, talked about Atmanirbhar Bharat and Self-Reliant India. Now, UKIBC, we conducted a survey and 77% of respondents said that Self-Reliant India is a positive. While that's it's a big number, it's an encouraging number, it does also imply that around a quarter of businesses think that Self-Reliant India is not a positive. And those that have cited concerns about Self-Reliant India say they think it's protectionist and it will curtail rather than support international trade and investment because of increased tariffs, some non-tariff restrictions that they've witnessed, and efforts to create import substitution in India. Now, the government of India, from Mr. Modi down, have stressed that their approach is integration, not isolation. Nevertheless, I think it's important that the government of India and state governments, let's not forget how critical they are, that these governments are alert to the unintended consequences of Self-Reliant India. I think India needs to protect and indeed enhance its reputation as an open economy. If it, and in any way it's perceived to be protectionist, it could slow down the flow of investments and limit India's integration into the global supply chains. So that's things that are going on in India. And as India makes that journey and moves towards that self-reliant goal, the UK too is changing. Internationally, it's pursuing a well-founded interest in the Indo-Pacific, and it's reshaping its relationship with the European Union. At the same time, the UK is also addressing economic imbalances within its own borders so as to spur investment all across the country, not just in London and the South East. This is the so-called levelling up agenda. And at the same time, the UK is also put in place measures and plans to invest in sustainable and green growth within the UK to help it achieve its climate targets and to accelerate energy transition. This is the so-called Build Back Better agenda. Now, I think both the levelling up and Build Back Better are relevant for Indian businesses, Indian investors, because they should open up opportunities to access brilliant innovation, technology and talent living all across the UK, and to take part in the energy transition, this move towards a green economy that the UK and the rest of the world are very much on. Now, in conclusion, I want to say that a journey towards an FTA won't be straightforward. Inevitably, there will be bumps domestically for both governments, and probably in the bilateral relationship too. These things are probably inevitable. So I think it will be important that both governments look to build momentum and confidence in that negotiating process. And I think that can be done by delivering those incremental market access reforms and securing a series of interim or mini trade agreements which over time will form a comprehensive FTA. If there are wins we can capture in the short term, let's capture them and then keep on building on that. Now, while this transformational comprehensive strategic partnership is starting in challenging times in the midst of a pandemic, there's certainly optimism for a bright future where the UK and India become real partners that are taking a leading role in global affairs, particularly trade and investment affairs. So all that's left for me is to say some thank yous. Thanks to everyone for joining the session today. Thank you and congratulations to Kanche and the Diplomatist on the new report and on today's discussion. Now, the two countries are beginning this important journey on a 10-year roadmap. So discussions like this one today, I think, will be really important in helping to build and expand awareness of the positives that can be achieved from businesses and people, civil society coming together to debate and discuss and move forward the UK-India partnership. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Sujit. Back to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much for that interesting insight. I mean, one was about the three things which you like about the ETP was the focus part of it. It covers goods and services, so what table seems to be aggressive. We would also stress on the Atmanirbhar Bharat concerns of the UK industry. I'm sure that probably during Dr. S.P. Sharma's talk, he can probably provide Indian industries perspective on it. Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you for the insights. I would now request Lord Moylan, member of the House of Lords, UK Parliament, to speak on the topic of India and the United Kingdom, a collaboration between democracies. I had the pleasure of Lord Moylan speak at one of our virtual summits early this year. As someone who has previously worked closely with current British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, I'm again looking forward to Lord Moylan's insights on UK-India relations.
Thank you very much, and I'm very grateful to the Diplomatist and to all the organisers and sponsors of this important webinar, and I'm grateful to you for inviting me in particular. As you say, I have worked closely with Boris Johnson in the past and in more recent times as well, and he very kindly put me in the House of Lords last year. So I think I'm here to give a sort of UK parliamentary perspective on the roadmap 2030, and to give it the support that all of us want to see. All of us want to see it succeed. If we look back over the last 70 years, India has transformed itself enormously. Its agriculture has been transformed. It's become an industrial superpower, and now it's one of the world's leading players in the tech revolution, while retaining its national characteristics, including its hallowed democracy. India has made fantastic economic progress. And the reason I mention that is that while India's success and transformation is something that everybody around the world has noticed, it's easy to not to notice how much the United Kingdom has changed over that period as well. 70 years ago, we were a country focused on the extraction of natural resources with a strong manufacturing base and a society divided clearly between a large, mostly unionized industrial workforce and a small managerial class, subject to heavy regulation and central direction. We were also in decline. Thanks to the dramatic transformation and reorganization of the economy effected in the 1980s, we're now an economy much more based on services, we're more globalized, and our social divisions, or at least the ones we talk about, are more concerned with identity and with grappling with the consequences of globalization and its social and environmental effects than they are with class and economic standing. So Britain has changed enormously too. And Brexit has its place in that context. I was and remain a passionate supporter of Brexit. And the first reason was to rescue our democratic self-government. That's something that Indians will be very understanding of, given the firm commitment to democracy the country has shown in the past and today. The second reason is a little bit more of a gamble, but I think we can be more successful economically outside the European Union because we can be more flexible, we can reach agreements more quickly, and I think we have opportunities now that didn't exist before. So we are a partner looking for friends. We are looking for people to go and strike deals with, which will be mutually beneficial. And I think you will find that the British government will bring a great sense of commitment to the talks and to the whole process that is set out in the roadmap. There is another reason why the UK and India should, in my view, have closer relations, and that is to do with foreign affairs. Outside the Middle East, which one might come back to in a moment, the key threats to democratic stability at the moment, and for some time to come, are Russia and China. The whole democratic world is agreed on this. And even in America, China policy was one of the few things that Trump and Biden could agree on, for example. But the EU is a notable outlier on this and has a policy of cozying up much more closely to China with new investment agreements. And Germany in particular is very forgiving of Russia's aberrations, and the pressing ahead with the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline is a prominent example of that. And of course, it's not possible to discuss global affairs at the moment without some reference to what is happening, what has been happening in Afghanistan. Yesterday, Parliament in the UK was recalled for a day of very strong and powerful debate about what has been happening there. And it's not merely the disruptive threat that a militantly Islamic government might give rise to. We will have to see how that develops. We will have to handle it and manage it as we go ahead. It is more the questions that the episode raises about the US role in the world that are more troubling. And at the very least, that means that all democracies should have a renewed focus on finding ways of collaborating in a wide range of areas to preserve freedom and prosperity. So with that strategic and political background, we come to thinking about the UK's and India's view of future relations with each other. Now, as Kevin said, we already have a very strong and growing trade relationship. And in the year before the pandemic hit, as Kevin said, bilateral trade between the two countries grew at a very vibrant 11%. And our investment relations support over 500,000 jobs in each other's economies, including many UK jobs in tech and telecoms. We have a strong and well-established series of joint fora in which the two governments discuss global trade. There's the Joint Economic and Trade Committee, the India-UK Economic and Financial Dialogue, and now there is the UK-India Financial Markets Dialogue as well. And all of this now has to be brought together and understood in the context of the Roadmap 2030, agreed by the two prime ministers earlier this year. All of these encounters in the past few months have produced individual initiatives, the details of which you are as familiar with as I am, but they tend to cluster in the areas of food and drink, financial services, high tech, and infrastructure investment. We have a great deal to offer each other in all of these areas. The immediate agreed ambition is what is being called an enhanced trade partnership, and in the course of time, and not too much time, I hope, a full free trade agreement between the two countries. This approach shows that the UK on its own can move fast and flexibly to make partial agreements that can achieve easy wins for both sides, and it should make it an attractive negotiating partner for India. There will be many shared strategic concerns which could allow a degree of cooperation that respects Indian neutrality. We have much that we have borrowed from each other culturally, and of course, British people of Indian descent play an important and increasing role in our politics and our economy here. At the moment, both countries are grappling with the terrible effects of the pandemic. Both are leading the world in finding a way out of it through mass vaccination. When all of this is behind us, however, I'm confident an ever deeper relationship can be promoted that will benefit both countries. Now, since I see that I've got a minute or two left on the clock, I'm going to add just one or two words of advice, if I may, which apply to everyone involved in trying to make this work. And that is simply to say that in the United Kingdom, there isn't a sufficiently broad focus as yet on the value of improved trade relations with other countries. It's not just India, but with other countries. I think you have to think of us as a country which used to have trade at the heart of our politics. And if you go back 100 years, there was an election in 1906, which was entirely on the question of free trade. The populace was engaged with issues of trade policy. But over the last nearly 50 years, we've outsourced our trade policy to the European Union. So to some extent, we have lost the habit and the language and the understanding of trade issues in our domestic policy. And that applies as much to many politicians as it does to the policy. And so I think a case needs to be made and an argument needs to be made to raise the profile of the importance of trade in itself, the importance of free trade over protectionism, and crucially, the importance of India to Britain's future trading relations. And anything that people involved in this webinar or on the Indian side can do to think collaboratively about how they can enhance that message in the UK, especially as the pandemic recedes, would, I think, be very helpful to promoting the goals we all share of a free, open trading relationship between our two countries, which I look forward to seeing very much, and I hope increasingly well before we get to 2030. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Lord Moylan, for the interesting insights. I mean, as you did mention, China is, of course, a concern which India shares with UK. And thank you very much for the inputs regarding making trade has sort of discussions in to sort of bring trade into the main focus in domestic policy discussions. Thank you very much, Lord Moylan. Next, we would go to Ms. Yashodhara Dasgupta, who is a senior trade policy advisor at the British High Commission in India, to share her thoughts on UK and India building a deeper trade relations. Over to you, Mrs. Dasgupta.
Thank you. Thanks, Sujit. Again, to start off, good morning, good afternoon, whichever part of the globe you're on. Pleasure to be here, and thank you to the Diplomatist for the invitation. You might have heard us say this a number of times: trade and investment sits at the heart of the UK-India bilateral ties. And as with any good speech, I'll start off with a few numbers. This is evidenced by our strong economic relationship with trade of over 18 billion in 2020 and supporting 500,000 jobs on both sides. India is the UK's second largest source of investment in terms of number of projects. Last year alone, 99 new projects were started. In 2020, the UK was actually India's largest goods exports market in Europe. The UK and India are committed to deepening this relationship. We've actually been working towards this goal since 2016, starting with the Joint Working Group on Trade and the Joint Trade Review to identify initial sectors of mutual interest. This was very much the building blocks leading to where we are now. We started with ICT, agri-food and drinks, and healthcare, and this has expanded quite a bit, as you've heard from some of our panelists. As a testament to our mutual commitment, the UK and India trade ministers have met regularly throughout 2020 and 2021 to drive forwards progress. This has included the meeting of the UK-India JETCO, the Joint Economic and Trade Committee, in July, virtual trade ministerial in November in November that year, and a visit from our Secretary of State to India in February 2021. Since then, ministerial and working level conversations have continued to progress the talks with momentum and pace. As you will be aware, during a virtual meeting on 4th May, Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Prime Minister Narendra Modi agreed a 2030 roadmap, which will provide a framework for UK-India relations. I'm happy to hear everyone so up to date on what that includes. Health, climate, trade, education, science and technology, defense, just to mention, in many ways, these areas are very, very linked to each other. The roadmap includes a commitment to deepen our economic relationship through the launch of the Enhanced Trade Partnership. It confirms our intent to negotiate a free trade agreement. The Prime Minister has also announced a $1 billion pound new UK-India trade and investment deals and the ambition to double bilateral trade by 2030. The ETP, or the Enhanced Trade Partnership, is a really important step for us. It will unlock new opportunities for British businesses exporting to India and Indian businesses investing in the UK. The ETP reaffirms the sort of ambition to double trade, as I just mentioned, and it declares a shared intent to begin negotiations on a comprehensive free trade agreement. This is a clear direction for the future of our trade relationship, which we fully expect to be bolstered by a full FTA in the future. Specifically, the ETP, how will this help? It will include the removal of barriers to trade through a market access package. UK businesses in particular will see enhanced economic benefit in agriculture, in healthcare, legal services, education, and the Indian industry in seafarers, marine, and healthcare. The commitments we have made to increase trade will create jobs on both sides. It will help more brilliant UK products get on Indian shelves and vice versa. Now, where are we now? Before we can start the FTA negotiations, there will be a pre-negotiation phase that needs to be completed. This phase refers to a period of stakeholder engagement, scoping, FTA scoping, and other domestic processes necessary on both sides to prepare for the start of the negotiations. As part of the stakeholder engagement, I hope some of you, at least if not many of you, are aware that DIT has launched a 14-week public consultation as on 25th May. It will run until the end of August. We do encourage all stakeholders to participate. The UK government is dedicated to making sure that the UK-India trade policy is reflective of UK as a whole, and it brings benefits to both citizens and businesses. We want a deal that slashes barriers to doing business and trading with India's $2 trillion pound economy and a market of 1.4 billion consumers. This includes removing tariffs for us for up to 150% on whiskey and 125% on British-made cars. Wide input from consumers and businesses across sectors will help the UK craft a deal that includes closer cooperation in future-focused industries. You've heard me saying science, technology, services. We believe this will create high-value jobs across the country. The UK also aims to make it easier for services firms to operate in the Indian market, boosting the UK status as an international services hub. India's growing middle-income population and highly connected youth will be the target consumers for the type of goods and services the UK excels in. We look forward to engaging with our stakeholders throughout this summer and probably autumn now. Your responses will help shape the government policy positions ahead of our negotiations. Why are we invested in India? It's the world's largest democracy and a growing population. India's economy is estimated to be $2.7 trillion at the end of 2021. Since the first UK-India JETCO, in fact, in 2005, India has contributed more to the global GDP than any country outside of China and US. We recognize the central role that India can play in global economic growth. And as our Prime Minister set out in the integrated review of our foreign policy in April, the UK-India strategic relationship as a whole will be a core agenda for us in the coming decade. I will stop there, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the discussion. Once again, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shodra Dasgupta. That was a very good, again, the focus on enhanced trade agreement really showcases the intent of UK and India to sort of take those mini steps before going for the comprehensive free trade agreement. We do hope that that gets signed at the earliest. Now, I would now request Dr. Asif Iqbal, President, India Economic Trade Organization, to speak on the topic of India-UK, possibility of inching towards the FTA. Had the pleasure of collaborating with Dr. Iqbal on a number of occasions and also hosted him at one of our summits, the British Parliament. Dr. Iqbal is someone who has deep access to leaders in the business community in India and globally. I look forward to his inputs.
Thank you very much, Sujit. Thank you, Diplomatist. And esteemed delegates, welcoming you all from the UK and our colleagues in India. It's quite important a topic for us to understand about the UK and India's relationship, the trade relationship, especially after the exit of UK from the Brexit. So now, why are we warming up? You know, India seems to be very warming up and coming closer to a trade deal with the UK. I think in May this year, the UK's Prime Minister and our Prime Minister, they both launched this transformational strategic comprehensive partnership. And they had this 10-year roadmap featuring the, enhanced trade partnership with an intent to negotiate the FTA. So now the FTA talks between both India and EU had come to a halt in 2013 after the two sides failed to resolve major differences over its scope. But post-Brexit, UK is now independently positioned to strike a trade deal with India on its own, rather than as a part of a large trading bloc. It is free to have own start thinking and decision-making process. And I think it is not going to be diluted from what is required for to strike this particular trade deal. And for us, it's more than a year that we have pulled out of the China-led regional RCEP, that is a comprehensive economic partnership. After the Modi government took the second term, we immediately withdrew from the RCEP. But we have stepped up our efforts to negotiate free trade agreements with other major economies. And separate discussions are currently underway with the UK and with the EU separately. So this is something that we have been able to do that. And I hope the UK is going to be as cooperative as India inside, so that we can zero in on a list of achievable items that would help the UK showcase the benefits of leaving the European EU. So what is the advantage for India that they have left the EU, and how can we showcase those benefits for the UK is important for us, so that it can also allow India to forge new bilateral ties after this pact in 2019. And we expect to see how we can finalize this interim agreement by the end of this year, which would give the British medical devices and agricultural products, especially apples, quinces and pears. This access to the Indian markets is very important for us because these fruits need to come here, while also widening the scope of employment in the UK. There are nurses, there are seafarers, and there are a lot of HSMP visas given to Indian professionals, the high-skilled migrant professional visas. And I think this is going to open up a lot of these gaps that are needed for these particular categories. However, there are issues that remain, including Indian high tariffs right now on alcohol and automobiles. The UK, the last time we spoke, the UK wanted to remove tariffs, including 150% levy on whiskey and 125% duty on imported cars. So I think that is very important for us to see how we can do that. UK did it with Australia, and now there is a very robust trade happening with Australia on the cars and on the whiskies. While we in India, we are looking at a data secure nation, the status of a data secure nation, and the areas that include e-commerce, public procurement, financial and banking services are yet to be discussed. Of course, we want to keep aside the Vodafone episode that did a little bit of a difference to the India-UK trade relations. But I think we are getting more and more serious in adapting the legalities and to understand the international laws, and we would like to address that. Therefore, an enhanced trade partnership would aim to land early wins, by cutting tariffs ahead of the full FTA. If you work on the whiskey and the vehicles, which is very, very important, because these are the areas that had a strong offensive interest for the UK. And we both, India and UK, should try and leverage this agreement to grow and diversify our exports and attract investment for each other. And the FTA with India will give it access to a large and growing market in India with an attractive destination for investors from the UK, and the supply chain diversification, which is really become an important policy, especially which is a big concern post-COVID-19. And I believe that it is expected to remain one of the one very important aspect in the foreseeable future, because the modern day FTAs are wide, and they encompass a wide range of areas, not just beyond the trade in goods. They also encompass trade in services, investments, intellectual property, and various other trade remedy measures that we can think of. It also enhances India's economic and political influence in the Indo-Pacific region, especially after the new Taliban regime and the interest shifting from the Western interests and the Eastern interests for India. So since we are more inclined towards the West, it's really important for us. And the UK has said that it is going to start negotiations for a trade agreement by the end of this year. And let us see if it is currently in a pre-negotiation scope of FTA. And we could see tariffs slashed on these kind of things. And Indian producers like rice, people who are exporting rice, and let's say they will get a larger access and a greater access to the UK market under this particular deal. Last year, I think June 2021, this year, our organizations were responsible to transmit information to collect suggestions from stakeholders and trade associations in both India and UK for the partnership. And we were particularly involved in understanding which are the areas that would be needed to be addressed, and how the government of India is committed to include for an inclusive trade policy, so it can address all the stakeholders. So we got in a lot of views and suggestions from various entities regarding the FTA drafting, and it was really important for us. Then there are some priority areas that we noticed, which were something like into the goods, into tariffs, and the rules of origin and certification issues were needed to be addressed. This is something that we understood from a lot of exporters. And technical regulations, standards, and their certification. This was very important from their side. And intellectual property and the geographical indications, digital e-commerce issues were very, very important. And specific areas of interest that we found out between India and UK were apparels in goods, and the pharmaceuticals in the market access, information technology in services, and data protection. These were some very important areas, and how it could include and what suggestions people would have given. This is all we have collected. And we have given these concerns and justifications that are necessary with collecting relevant data and potential proposals for collecting the right kind of statistical information. And we are still here collecting a lot of data that we think is needed for the India-UK's trade relationship, for the FTA. And once again, let us hope and see that the new situation that we have, the geopolitical situation, will also help India to explore new business areas with the UK, and to ensure that there is a much more strengthening of our relations as per our vision and the mission of our Prime Minister in India and the new Prime Minister of the UK, who both have forged this relationship. And trade and commerce, I think, is going to take a new high by the end of this year, while we sign the preliminary FTA. So once again, I would like to thank all the panelists and also the diplomatists that we are getting some very good inputs here, and we are taking home some very useful data here. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Sujit.
Thank you, Dr. Iqbal. Thank you very much for putting forth your thought about removing of barriers across a few of the items. And also glad to know about the stakeholder consultation process that's going on from your end, and the feedback which have been submitted, which will hopefully help the UK government to put forth a good comprehensive FTA in place. Thank you very much. I would now request Dr. S.P. Sharma, Chief Economist, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to put forward his thoughts on the right time to move ahead for the UK-India FTA.
Thank you, Chair Shri Surjit Nair, and thank you, Kanchi Batra. Thank you, Diplomatist, for inviting me to present my viewpoint on India-UK trade relations, particularly most opportune time for signing the free trade agreement. I would go by the statement given by Yashodhara Das Gupta that India is increasing its trajectory and participation in the global economic scenario. At this juncture, I believe we have a lot of reforms during the last 6-7 years, starting from Make in India, then Startup India, then a lot of reforms for the regulatory environment, then IBC, then there were reforms for the real estate segment. So trajectory of reforms increased from Make in India to ease of doing business, and we improved a lot from ease of doing business segment from 142 in 2014 to 63 in the recent years. But unfortunately, in March 2020, the economy was impacted by the bad impact of pandemic coronavirus, and there was a significant impact on the growth scenario of the GDP numbers. GDP declined to minus 24% and then minus 7.5%. But with the reforms, dynamic reforms by the government, then we recovered from the lows of first quarter of 2021 to the positive trajectory in the later quarters. And then now the growth projections are very, very promising that we will grow somewhere between 9.5 to 10% in the current financial year. That is a very promising number projected by various international organizations and our government also. Going ahead, now the time is to re-engineer and to re-energize the global value chains, and we are very much keen to participate in the global trajectory, in the global trade trajectory, and we have anticipated that we will move forward with 400 billion exports in the current financial year. That is the clarion call given by our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, that now we should look forward to the $400 billion export trajectory for the current financial year, and we are confident that we will achieve this number. And the time for the FTA is like we have signed so many free trade agreements during the last 10-15 years, but now the time is to re-energize those FTAs and to sign more promising new FTAs with the promising UK. UK is one of the steady trade partner with India, as India moves from slow to steady to fast, and then fast to fastest. I believe this trajectory of the trade with UK will also move in the same direction from steady to fast and then fastest. So now the trajectory is only for $14-15 billion of the exports and imports, but we have to increase to double this trajectory and to triple this trajectory in the next 4-5 years, because there are a lot of opportunities to move forward with promising areas, as mentioned by various speakers in the current session, that there are a lot of promising areas starting from the new engineering areas, pharmaceutical, then fashion technology, then construction activities. As India's thrust for construction activity and infrastructure is very, very high. So UK companies can provide know-how to develop state-of-the-art infrastructure, because we have a great trajectory of the investments for the infrastructure sector. We have a NIP, National Infrastructure Pipeline, which is of more than 100 crore investments scenario in the next 5 years. So in this scenario, we believe the global collaborations, like collaborations with the promising economies like UK, will be fruitful to move forward with the expanded trade and investment scenarios. And growth prospects for both the economies, like trade and development between UK and India, are very promising during the many years, and these are sustainable also, not only for the years but also for the coming decades. And I believe time is most opportune to re-engineer and to re-energize the value chain with the United Kingdom, and to address the issues related to the non-tariff barriers, and to provide more and more market access with the efficient give and take. So India has continuously engaged in enhancing its economic relations with the promising growth partners since the advent of structural reforms starting from 1991, then again the second set from 2014, from the bilateral trade to the close strategic partners, and UK is one of them. And the economic relations between the two nations are very, very dynamic, and trajectory has to be increased to the next level. Trade bid of investment perspective, UK is the sixth biggest investor with FDI of US dollar 30 billion in the last 20 years, and UK share in India's total FDI is at around 6%, and India is the second largest source of FDI in UK. Majority of the investments are in the manufacturing sector and in the financial, insurance and business services, transport, storage and communication services, and retail and restaurant, among others. So going ahead, India and UK relationship is bound by long history. Indian exports to UK are mainly focused on consumer goods. About 60% of the total exports are in the consumer goods, and in the nearly 31 of the total imports from UK are focused on the raw materials. So this is a proper give and take, I believe, between the two economies, as we are a major supplier of the consumer goods and UK is a major supplier of the raw materials. So this is a strong complementarity between the two dynamic economies. But we have to explore this trajectory with more and more participation of the goods and to increase the trade basket of the two economies, and to enhance the volumes of the exports, because now we are trading so many items, but the volumes are very, very low. So if the demand is there and we are in a give and take, then we have to increase the volume of the exports and imports to increase this total trade to the next level, to the double or triple in the next 5-6 years. That will be the target from the both the nations. As we have a target of $400 billion for the export, so that is an increase of 37% from the last year of $291 billion. So going by the default number, I believe our exports to UK are at around $8 billion. So in my view, our exports for the current year would be somewhere between $11 to $12 billion. So going by the same number, the imports will be at around 5 to 6. So trajectory of the trade will be at around $17 to $18 billion for the current financial year, considering the back of the annual exercise according to the development in the trade scenario between the both of the economies and pent-up demand in the global growth trajectory. So going ahead, I believe prospects are very, very bright, and we have to move forward with our great strength and to for a proper negotiation and give and take to sign a strong free trade agreement, which is which becomes a model for the other economies also, that this free trade agreement between UK and India is a model free trade agreement which comprises all the efficient give and take and the trajectory of the great basket of commodities. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. I will stop here, and I would love to have questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. It's good to hear the views of Dr. Sharma, who is part of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which is one of the largest and the oldest trade bodies in India. Glad to know about the industry's interest, that UK is a steady partner, and also about the aspect that the majority of the trade, I mean, from India to UK is about consumer goods, and from UK, majorly the Indian industries receives the raw materials. Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Now we move on to Pratik, Mr. Pratik Dani. He's the Managing Director of EPG Global and Strategic Consulting. And I would welcome him to talk about the sector wish list for enhanced trade partnership. I had the pleasure of having Pratik at one of our virtual conferences last month. And with his expertise of working with a number of sectors in the UK-India corridor, I look forward to then put on the wish list from sectors who are keen to pursue business opportunities in the UK-India corridor. Over to you, Prateek.
Thank you so much, Sujit. Thank you to Kanchi and the Diplomatist team and the rest of the panelists for their comments as well. As we've seen from such a rich and varied discussion already so far, this is a phenomenal time to be talking about UK-India trade, because it's the first time probably ever that such a rich and varied conversation has happened. And it's happened because there's a post-Brexit opportunity for direct bilateral engagement, where there is commitment from the British side and commitment from the Indian side. I want to focus my comments, like Sujit said, on a bit of a sector wish list. And I want to contextualize some of the comments. I think that particularly Kevin, Yashodhara, and Lord Moylan made a little while earlier. When David Cameron first became Prime Minister, his first big delegation abroad was to India. He took over 100 business leaders, and he said his primary objective was to double trade with India in the next 5 years, 2010 to 2015. I think if you ask anybody on that flight that was with him, they would say, fine, but we're starting from an incredibly low base, so doubling is not that big a deal. But putting that ambition, putting that number out there, as we've done now, I think it helps focus minds. Whatever the technical and the kind of intense trade negotiations happen in the background, certainly from a public perspective, putting a line in the sand to say between now and 2030, we want to reach 50 billion of trade, which is doubling, is absolutely great. However, to put that in a bit of context, using some of Yashodhara's numbers, if in 2020 bilateral trade was 18 billion pounds and it grew by 10%, if it continues to grow at 10% every year, we would anyway reach 47 billion by the year 2030. So we're targeting 50 billion. So we're actually only talking about 3 billion extra of trade if the current trajectory continued. I don't want to be a dampener on some of the official British government perspective, but the growth trajectory is already there. I see very much the purpose of an enhanced trade partnership is to help that along, rather than there'll be a macro level shift in that growth potential. It'll be a micro level kind of enablement of a lot of things that are happening across the sectors. Kevin's points on the enhanced trade partnerships advantages were absolutely spot on. So it's a really impressive timetable. There's a focus not just on goods, but on services as well. And I think for me and the kind of companies I work with, the market access and regulatory issues, there's a big focus on that, which is, in Kevin's words, immediate and ongoing. I think that is really, really important. Not just companies in India, but American and other companies in India would definitely concur with the fact that ease of doing business in India and just getting stuff done in a common sense and straightforward manner, that is the biggest bottleneck. That's the biggest roadblock foreign investors and foreign companies have in terms of creating jobs, creating the right quality of jobs and investing in India. So I think that the focus on these three things is absolutely wonderful as part of the ETP. When Theresa May was Prime Minister, she talked very much of an industrial strategy for Britain. And the nomenclature has changed between May and Boris Johnson. And again, Kevin touched a little bit on this. We're talking about building back better and leveling up. And what that really means in terms of trade partnerships with other countries, India or others, is that there's a big focus on the M25 and London for Indian investors and others. But investing outside London, outside Manchester, in the Northeast, in Yorkshire, in Rotherham, Burnley, places where unemployment is significantly higher, and the quality of foreign investment just doesn't reach those areas. I think that's really important for Britain. And I'm happy that Brexit has given the UK the opportunity to be able to have a much more focused discussion on being able to bring Indian investment and Indian trade to these regions. The same argument applies to India as part of these negotiations. One example is the reason why you have so many migrant workers from, let's say, a place like Bihar going, whether it's to Mumbai or as far as Kerala, is because there are no jobs, there are no industries available locally for them, for low-skilled and semi-skilled workers. Britain Britain and India have a great opportunity here to be able to create jobs in those areas. It's consistent with the objectives of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Ultimately, it's about India being more self-reliant, not in the metro cities, but in those rural areas where there are no jobs, and being able to create them. And similarly, from the British side, being able to level up the north of England, which maybe has been politically ignored for a long time. I think Lord Moylan's point about India being a great counterweight to working with China, I think that's really important as a broad perspective to bear in mind here. The largest, I see one of the comments in the Q&A was around the EV market. A Chinese company, Envision, announced they were going to build a 1 gigawatt battery plant with Nissan in the north of England just a few weeks ago. And there have been several similar Chinese investments in the UK that have been announced. Those kind of areas, I think there's a huge opportunity for India and the UK to work together, which I think have not been explored so far as part of the ETP, although there is a climate change, at least somewhat of a climate change focus. For example, the world leading technology that is an alternative to lithium-ion batteries. So lithium-ion batteries, for those of you who are familiar with it, it's a supply chain almost entirely controlled by China across the world. India, it's a dirty secret that India's EV revolution is almost entirely dependent on China. There's no two ways about it. But there's a British technology from a company from Sheffield called Faradion, which is the world leader in sodium-ion technology. And I know they're looking at manufacturing facilities in India. That there are other companies in the northwest, sorry, that are looking at other innovative climate change technologies, whether that's Asset Cool, which works with electrician transmission companies in India currently, or others. Ahead of COP26, some of these companies are making announcements about some of their plans in India. And I think those things are really exciting in terms of building back better in both countries, creating jobs, and being consistent with the climate change agenda. And I think, however we all as stakeholders in this process sell this internally in India and in the UK, I think that China question, making it about a counterweight to China, I think that's really important to emphasize, because I think that is that the wider public may not appreciate, the nitty-gritties of will tariffs go up by 1% or 2% or down, whatever, but they will appreciate that wider picture. I want to focus a little bit on some of the things that I think are intractable issues that there will be hopefully incremental improvements as part of the ETP, but they're longer term conversations both countries should work on. On good regulatory practices and good governance, I think there are a lot of opportunities for improvement, which will result in higher trade. In space and aerospace, for example, the scale of opportunity in India is massive. It's always been massive. But if you look at downstream space, there's very little in India. Upstream is almost entirely ISRO. The ease of doing business, lengthy customs delays, unrealistic local content requirements. I think all of these are areas where Britain can easily do more business with India. In chemicals and food and drink sectors, I think there's an opportunity for harmonizing with global norms, and I think that a lot of the other panelists have spoken about. And then I think the other thing is around taxation. It's a touchy subject, and it's something that I know behind the scenes a lot of conversations have happened, but I'm really glad the Indian government has backtracked on the retrospective tax with Ken and Vodafone. It is not helpful in any way whatsoever to have taken this long to do it, but I'm glad that it happened, and I'm glad that it happened this year while the enhanced trade partnership conversations are going on. But I think things like that, I think that the government on the India side needs to be really careful to not spend a huge amount of time doing something wonderful in terms of trade deals, and then at the same time do things which don't make any sense, like the retrospective tax. I think if there is commitment from the Indian government to make sure those things don't happen again, whether this government or future governments, it doesn't matter. I think those things will create a kind of base institutional comfort for foreign investors to invest significantly more, much more quickly in India. And I think that that also goes to one of the questions I think Ranjit Kumar had asked about the Cairn energy issue. I think now that that has dissipated, at least in terms of high levels, I think that restores business confidence. And I saw a statement from UK IBC a couple of weeks ago to say exactly that. It's good for business. It restores business confidence. And my last point I would just touch on briefly is on the concern around Atmanirbhar Bharat, about self-reliant India. That is not, I know the speech and the coining of the phrase only happened last year and during COVID, but that narrative and a crawl towards that has been there for several years. So it's been evident in the tariffs applied by India on imports from a simple average most favored nation tariffs of about 13% in 2014. It's gone up to about 14.5% in 2020. So that creep has been there. And I really hope that Yashodhara mentioned whiskies and automobiles, but I really hope that much more widely there is a recognition that this for small British exporters, it's really important. It makes a difference on the margins. And also economics 101, microeconomics 101 that you learn at university, you learn that just because one side is exporting more, one side is importing less, it doesn't mean that the side that's importing more is losing. There are gains from trade because of comparative advantage. Just because India is importing more from somewhere, it doesn't mean India is losing. It means something can be built better, more efficiently elsewhere, and therefore resources are better allocated. I think that basic economic premise, or also I think that there is a cognizance of that on the Indian side, but I think maybe we need to push that a little bit more. So I'll end my comments there.
Thank you, Pratik. Thank you very much for your inputs. Now, I mean, it was very interesting to talk about having UK companies to invest in those regions in India which does not have significant investment yet, and for having Indian companies invest in those regions in UK which does not yet have much of the investments. I'm sure that the UK and Indian governments have worked out a number of incentives and subsidies for companies which are looking to invest in these regions. And also with the retrospective tax, I'm sure that it really sort of increases the investors' confidence of doing business in the Indian market. Thank you, Pradeep, for the input. We have a bit more time, around 15 minutes left for us to take a few questions from the audience. I have a question here from Ambassador Sri Kumar Menon. So I will leave it to any of the panelists to take this question. His question is, given the fact that exports of UK-built cars to India has increased more than 10 times since 2010, and in the light of the ongoing ETP negotiation for the removal of tariffs on auto products, how do you see things panning out in post-Brexit scenario for the UK-India trade in the auto sector? Would any of the panelists want to take this question? Kevin, I think you can give a bit of a brief, and then Pratik can probably take it further from there.
We're all being polite there, allowing someone else to come in. I think that if tariffs reduce, not just on finished cars, which is the 125%, but on auto components as well. Let's think about auto components. I think it was in the budget this year, the finance minister doubled tariffs from 7.5% to 15%. That measure plays into the point Pratik was making about tariffs do inhibit trade. I think that the risk is also that they inhibit collaboration between UK and India businesses. To become a global manufacturing hub, which self-reliant India and Make in India set India on a journey to achieve. I think you need to import as well as export. So if the tariffs are high coming into India for an auto component, then automotives that are being sold within India or exported from India, they're going to be more expensive, which would make an Indian car less competitive when they were trying to sell into Southeast Asia. So I think the issue on tariffs and automobiles are at three levels: the trade in completed cars or automobiles, the supply chain interplay that goes on, and then thirdly, joint R&D that takes place as well. And I think what we've seen certainly in the last sort of decades, 15 years I've been working on the UK-India corridor, is the amount of co-creation of new technologies that are taking place. And I think if India sort of remains an open market with low tariffs, then it can encourage more R&D investment as well into the country, which will only, again, to use Pratik's comparative advantage element, if India can get more technology R&D done, more high quality components coming in, then India's comparative advantage in terms of export and quality vehicles will increase. So I think lowering tariffs for completed vehicles and for components will spur more growth within India and India's exports as well in the automotive sector.
Sujit, could I?
Yeah, sure, Lord Martin, you can
add to that. I think sometimes I take very much what Pratik says. What we're discussing is quite big changes in our relationship. They appear to be quite big changes, but actually they're likely to have relatively modest effects on their own. So even if Indian import tariffs on motor cars drop to zero tomorrow from Britain, it's extremely unlikely that India is going to be flooded by cars made in Sunderland or the north of England. It's just not going to happen. I mean, the capacity to build them just isn't there anyway. There might be increased imports of some luxury and sports cars and things like that, but this is going to be relatively marginal in terms of total economic activity. So I think this is a sort of, it sounds like a very brave step, but it actually is likely to have quite modest effects that India might fear. But instead, as Kevin says, what it will help to do is create that bond which operates further back in the supply chain, including in the intellectual property supply chain. And the research and the collaboration, the matching of standards together would allow, I think, a great deal more activity that would improve manufacturing quality and product quality of parts and therefore of whole vehicles on both sides. And in that connection, whether we're successful in this is another matter, but in that connection, of course, we have a very big push to increase electric vehicle and indeed perhaps even hydrogen-powered vehicles. And we have a policy of banning the sale of the internal combustion engine vehicles by, I think, 2030. I think that's the date where we've now agreed on. So whether we stick to that is a very sensitive political matter, I might say, but let's not, we won't dwell on that for a moment. That's an internal British domestic quarrel. So I think these look like very big, brave steps, but actually they're things that India and the UK should embrace quite quickly, because there could be huge benefits on both sides, and the downsides that people might fear are not going to materialize. And it's not going to be the case that you're going to be flooded with Scotch whiskey either, any more than you currently are, you know.
Well, let me pick up on Lord Moylan's last point there on Scotch whiskey, and because of my accent, people may feel that I have a certain bias, but no, I'll drink anything. India's Scotch whiskey's second biggest market globally, but Scotch whiskey only has 2% of the Indian market, a tiny percentage of a fast-growing market. And the majority of the Scotch that's imported into India is in bulk form, which is then put into Indian-made liquors So that Scotch is blended into an Indian manufactured spirit, which is then there for domestic consumption, but increasingly being exported. You know, one Scotch whisky company in India exports to over 30 markets from India. So reducing the tariffs on Scotch whisky, as Lord Moylan says, won't flood India with Scotch, but it will be a win for lots and lots of different people. It's a win for those Indian spirits manufacturers because they can get lower cost inputs, which will improve their margins and their exportability. It will be a win for, I think, Indian consumers who get better quality product at a lower cost. I think it'll be a win for state governments as well because their revenues will go up. The tariffs and the duties may be down, but because there'll be increased sales, their overall revenues will go up. And it will be a win, of course, for those Scottish distillers, particularly the smaller distillers who at the moment don't have the marketing bandwidth to take their single malts into India. So if the costs were lower, they can become more competitive. So it's a win for people in the UK, in my home country, but it's a win for people all across India as well, consumers and businesses.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much for the insight. We have the question from Ranjit, which Pratik did address about the Crane's energy issue. So do you think the Crane's energy issue would impact investment from UK to India? Do any of the panelists, do you want to add your inputs to this? The Crane's energy issue.
I'm sorry, I can't understand the question. Could you just repeat it?
Do you think, the question was, do you think the Crane energy issue would impact investment from UK to India?
Look, I think we're starting, Britain is starting life as an independent trading nation with a clean sheet and looking forward optimistically. And I think we want to embrace a relationship with India in a very positive spirit. So I don't think we'll be looking for stumbling blocks, but clearly the more stability and predictability there is in our relationship and in the way in which British businesses can operate in India, the more trade is likely to be done. And the more British companies will say, yeah, that's really worth the effort, because it is an effort to get established in a new market. It's not, it requires a lot of work. And similarly, that stability and predictability inside a free trade agreement that is agreed by both parties would encourage more Indian businesses to establish themselves and try to seek business in the UK. So I think we're looking forward, looking back.
Thank you, Lord Moylan. That was very encouraging. We have another question here. Can we get more information on planned import of British-made duty structure, especially electric vehicles? What will be the duty structure? Do we have approximate information what would be the duty structure of the British-made cars?
Coming into India?
Yeah, coming into India.
That's not one for me.
Sujit, is the question about what the duty structure will be in the FTA?
It's not in the FTA. I think the attendee hasn't mentioned the name here. I don't think it was in regard to the FTA, was not specifically mentioned. Anyway, if we get a follow-up question on this sort of, so we'll go to the next one.
I think the summary is that the EV tariff structure in India is constantly changing, and also the subsidy structure is changing. But this is definitely one area where India doesn't want to import huge amounts. It wants to build the EV infrastructure from batteries through to cars, through to charging infrastructure locally.
Thanks, Pratik. We'll go to the next question by Karthik. I would like to know more about the progress made so far, and when will be the first set of policies announced, and when approximately could we expect to see the UK and Indian companies benefit? Again, how much importance has been given to the SME communities in both the countries as they are real backbone of the economy? I mean, more on the lines of the support from both governments for the SME communities. Ishwar, you want to take this question regarding the support from the trade body for the SMEs which are looking to enter the UK, I mean, the British SMEs which are getting into the Indian markets. And probably Mr. Sharma can probably put few inputs on what support the Indian government does provide for SMEs from UK, which are probably trying to make use of the opportunities here.
Sure, so I'll keep it brief. I think Pratik also mentioned the importance about small businesses. So I think, so I sit in the Department for International Trade. What I can share is that SME is absolutely crucial for us in terms of our efforts to enhance UK exports to India. SMEs, we know, are a core sector in the UK economy. Sector teams, trade promotion teams work very closely with SMEs that want to export to the Indian market, that want to enter the Indian market. I think in the context of the FTA, I can say that, and some of you may have heard this, but our SOS, Secretary of State Liz Truss, she's put a great emphasis on the inclusion of SME-friendly provisions in the FTA, so that everyone across the board, regardless of size, can benefit from it. And we do understand that trade barriers disproportionately impact smaller businesses. So both in the FTA and outside the FTA, I think we are very much cognizant of SMEs and the need to support them, and we do that.
Thank you, Shudra. Dr. Sharma, do you want to sort of add any of your inputs?
Because this is very important segment, and the Indian government is very keen to enhance the MSME segment and MSME put to the next level. And MSMEs are becoming the next growth engine of the Indian economy. And the participation of MSMEs, particularly in the exports, is very, very significant. At around 40% is the participation from the MSME segment in the total export trajectory. And particularly with the UK, as most dominance from the Indian exports towards UK is consumer goods. So most of the MSMEs are involved in such kind of production scenarios. And I believe the MSMEs collaboration and MSMEs participation after the free trade agreement will become more prominent as these businesses require a lot of support in the policy environment, because large conglomerates are always very good in fulfilling the compliances, but the MSMEs are not able to fulfill some time of the compliances. The compliance cost is very high for the MSMEs in India. So the government is doing a lot of reforms for the ease of doing business for the MSMEs. And I believe with such reforms, like a revision of the definition is also there. And now the turnover of 250 up to the 250 crores are all MSMEs. So the participation of MSMEs in Indian economy will increase in the coming times, and that will be the scenario of free trade agreement, that MSMEs participation and MSMEs significance in the trade scenarios will increase to the next level in the coming times. So I believe at this juncture, the major problem is from the awareness side. So there must be trade delegations or exchange of ideas between the small businesses, and particularly the awareness programs can be created between the two economies for the proper give and take of the products, because sometimes lack of awareness creates the trade barriers, and people are not able to import or export much because of the lack of awareness. So I believe MSMEs need strong handholding in terms of awareness and support in the ease of doing business and ease of doing trade between the two economies.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I think we are at 5:30 now, so 5:29. So we will we'll close because obviously the time was still 5:30, and I'm sure that all the other panelists have to take care of their other responsibilities. I would like to thank all the panelists out here for taking this time to participate in this panel discussion. Yeah, Kanchi, I mean, over to you to give you a word of thanks. Thank you very much for taking time and sharing your inputs.
Thank you, Mr. Nair. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who have generously helped us to make this event come together to become a success. I thank all the speakers, Mr. Kevin McCall, Lord Moreland, Mr. Shodhara Das Gupta, Dr. Asif Iqbal, Dr. S.P. Sharma, Mr. Pratik Dattani, and our chair, Mr. Sujit Nair, who have found time to grace this occasion. We were honored to have listened to your insightful remarks and are grateful to have had such eminent speakers with us. I once again thank you everyone whose contribution has made this webinar a successful one. Thank you and have a good day.